Anna stood silently in the darkness, behind a cold marble pillar, feeling like a faint shadow drifting through the brilliance of the party. She held a glass of icy water, her eyes fixed on the man she once called her husband. But tonight, he was no longer the man she loved. He was someone else entirely, a ghost that had overtaken everything she once believed about love and marriage. Peter, her husband, was laughing and chatting with the crowd around him, his eyes shining with confidence, yet that gaze never turned toward her. Anna could still remember the moment in the past when she stepped forward to congratulate him with a proud, fulfilled smile. But tonight, the truth had been laid bare. Anna was not the woman Peter wanted to present to his friends. She was merely an ornament hidden in the corner of the party, a nameless shadow. Through the years of their marriage, she had learned to remain silent, to accept that silence. Peter had built for her a life of material comfort, but in exchange demanded absolute quiet. Do not make noise, do not draw attention, he would always remind her like a command. She had grown used to it. But tonight, as she looked at him, it felt as though a dream had shattered. That feeling, a mix of confusion and realization, struck her as she understood she no longer existed in his eyes. His constant reminders not to disturb, not to disrupt his world, seemed to close in around her. She stood there in the shadows, like a puppet without strings. Everything had changed. On this night, Anna finally understood that her marriage had died long ago, only she had failed to see it. The glittering chandelier lights did nothing to warm her. Everything felt distant, artificial. People laughed, but those sounds felt far away, unable to reach her heart. She felt like a painting on the wall, unmoving, voiceless. Every movement of Peter reminded her of her own insignificance. She stood there, holding the glass without ever taking a sip, her eyes still following Peter, the man she once believed would be her lifelong companion. Suddenly, everything around her seemed to fall into stillness. A wave of silence spread through the air. All eyes turned toward the entrance, where a tall man had just walked in. Time seemed to slow, as if making way for him. Anna felt his gaze cut through the crowd, as though he were searching for something or someone. A jolt ran through her, something powerful shifting inside her. The man carried not only an air of authority, but an absolute confidence, as if he needed to prove nothing. And then his eyes met hers, just for a brief moment, yet enough to make her heart stop. She could hardly believe what she was seeing. It was him, Lucas, a part of her past she had tried so hard to bury. That moment was quiet, yet overwhelming. Lucas, the man she had left behind, the one who had walked away because of fear and pressure. He was not only her first love, but the only man who had ever truly stirred her heart. But he was no longer part of her past. He was now a powerful man in the eyes of everyone, someone whose world she could no longer enter. Anna's emotions were impossible to define. She felt like a shadow suddenly exposed to light. Everything around her beginning to blur. A wave of helplessness and buried pain surged within her. Peter, the man she had lived with for so many years, stood nearby without noticing anything. She had lived her entire life in silence, in the shadow of another person. But today, Lucas was the first to truly see her, to truly see who she was. When she and Lucas faced each other, everything around them seemed to fall silent. Conversations, laughter, all of it faded away. She looked into his eyes, and that feeling, the one she had buried for 20 years, rose again with overwhelming force. "I still remember you," Lucas said, his voice soft yet powerful, each word piercing straight into her heart. The feeling made Anna tremble. She could not speak. Every emotion, every pain from the past came rushing back. Lucas had found her. He had never forgotten her, even though she had tried to make him forget. And in his gaze, there was not only recognition, but affirmation, a reminder that she was not a shadow, that she still had value. And then everything suddenly shifted. Peter, clearly irritated, stepped forward. He cut between them, pulling Anna close to him. "This is my wife," Peter said, his voice low, filled with possession. But everything had changed. She was no longer his wife. She had found herself. Anna remained standing in silence, her gaze drifting toward Lucas, the man from her past she had tried so hard to forget. The tightness in her throat made it hard to breathe. Each second passed in a quiet tension filled with contradictions. The space of the party seemed to shrink around her until only Lucas remained, his eyes warm yet unfamiliar, as if they had never truly been apart. Peter stood beside her, his voice calm but cold, like a reminder. You are just my wife, Anna. You don't need to concern yourself with people like Lucas. Those words were not just control. They were a clear assertion that she was merely a piece in Peter's game, a decoration at the edge, unworthy of attention. But Lucas looked at her differently, with a gaze Peter could neither understand nor see. He did not need to hide his emotions, did not need to pretend. The truth in Lucas's eyes made it impossible for Anna to look away. She stood there in the shadows of the party, feeling the cold glass in her hand and the weight of Peter's words, not just as a husband's voice, but as chains that had kept her trapped. For 20 years, Anna had learned to live in a world where she had no voice. Peter, the man she married, had taught her that nothing mattered more than silence. Their marriage was built on control and material stability, yet it lacked everything that made emotions real. Anna had always felt like a still painting, placed carefully to preserve the image of a perfect family, seen by society but never allowed to speak. To Peter, everything had to be perfect. He loved appearances, loved social approval, loved the way everything followed the script he had written. Anna, as his wife, was part of that picture, standing beside him, always silent, always smiling, always fitting into the image he created. She had forgotten what freedom felt like, forgotten the world beyond that polished surface. Over the years, she had given up everything to maintain that illusion of peace. She was no longer the woman she used to be, the one who once had a voice in lively conversations, who longed for freedom and understanding. With each passing day, she became nothing more than a shadow of herself, submerged in the emotional emptiness that Peter had, intentionally or not, imposed on her. His gentle criticisms, his subtle suggestions about how she should live, what she should not do, slowly erased the image of the confident and strong woman she once was. Anna knew that Peter loved her in his own way, but that kind of love was not real love. It was possession. He loved the control he had over her life, loved being the one who decided everything. She was never allowed to make her own choices, from what she wore to who she met to what she said. Everything had to pass through Peter's approval, and whenever she did something he disliked, a single disappointed look was enough for her to understand that she had done something wrong. Every time she went out, every time she attended a social event, she had to stand beside him, hidden, never allowed to draw attention. That quiet submission had become a habit, a part of her life she had lived with for so long that she began to believe it was the only way to have stability and safety. But tonight, when Lucas's eyes found her, when he did not hide the recognition in his gaze, everything she once believed shattered. Peter never understood that all these years Anna had lived in silence, not because she had nothing to say, but because she was never allowed to speak. His control had slowly destroyed her dreams and desires. Every time she tried to speak, to share something, he would cut her off with soft criticism or a distant look, as if she did not deserve to have a voice. But tonight, as Lucas stood before her, looking at her without concealment, Anna realized she had been wrong to live in someone else's shadow. She had forgotten herself in the process of trying to please Peter. But now, standing before Lucas, she felt something far more powerful. She still had power. She could still decide her own life, even if that meant stepping out of the world Peter had built around her. That moment, when Lucas called her name, like a quiet affirmation that she was not just a decoration, not just a part of a story Peter had written, awakened her. She was not a silent woman, not a shadow in a glamorous life. She was Anna, someone who had the right to choose her own path. That realization unsettled her. She did not know what she would do next. But one thing was certain. She could not return to her old life, could not continue living under Peter's control for even one more day. This life, this marriage, no longer belonged to her. At that moment, the party was no longer a dazzling space of sparkling chandeliers and elegant outfits. All of it had become meaningless in Anna's eyes. There was only one thing she could see, Lucas. Everything seemed to stop the instant he appeared. The crowd, the laughter, all of it faded away, leaving only Lucas with his calm confidence, as if he were the center of the universe, and Anna was an inseparable part of that presence. She felt his gaze cutting through the crowd, searching for something she could not explain. A shiver ran down her spine. The image of Lucas from afar, surrounded by unfamiliar faces, somehow felt impossibly close. He was not a stranger, not an uninvited guest. He was her past, a vital part of her heart that she had tried to lock away for so many years. And then when Lucas's eyes met hers, everything around her blurred. Anna could not breathe, could not move. She stood frozen. Time seemed to rewind, pulling her back to the days they once shared, late afternoons by the lake, long conversations about the future, about dreams they had built together. Those memories, the sweet ones she had tried so hard to bury, now surged back stronger than ever. It was clear that everyone in the room felt the shift the moment Lucas entered. A strange silence spread, as if his presence was no coincidence. There was nothing ordinary about a man like Lucas, with authority and power in every step, looking directly at Anna. Someone she never imagined would cross paths with him in a place like this. Peter stood beside her, unaware of the change within her. He continued his conversations, still laughing, still proud of his achievements. But in that moment, Anna could clearly feel the difference between Peter and Lucas. Peter, with all his polished charm, could not understand what Lucas was doing. He could not see the change in Anna, could not sense that everything was shifting, slowly but undeniably. Lucas moved closer, and in that instant, Anna realized something she had never fully understood before. She had been trapped inside her own life. Everything she had tried to build with Peter, everything she had taught herself about being the perfect wife, suddenly lost all meaning. She stood there, looking at Lucas with a completely different feeling. It was not regret or confusion, but a powerful awareness that she had missed an entire part of her life out of fear. And when Lucas finally stood before her, Anna felt her heart stop. Everything around them disappeared. There was only the two of them, suspended in a moment of stillness they both could feel. She could not remember how long she had been standing there, but she knew that in that moment, Lucas did not see her as a forgotten woman hidden in the shadows of life. He looked at her with tenderness, with deep care, as if he had never truly left. "Anna?" Lucas said, his voice soft, yet enough to make her heart ache. The way he spoke her name, with a warmth she had not felt in so many years, made it impossible for her to hold back her emotions. Memories flooded back, promises, plans they once shared, everything she had left behind to marry Peter. In that moment, Lucas was everything she had lost, everything she had buried for a life she believed would give her safety. Peter stood beside her, a flicker of confusion crossing his face. He looked at Lucas, then at Anna, as if trying to understand what was happening. But Anna could no longer care. She no longer cared about Peter, no longer cared about what he thought, because this moment with Lucas, made her realize she had never been forgotten. She had never been a shadow, never just a part of the story Peter had written. Anna lifted her head and looked into Lucas's eyes, and she understood that this was not coincidence. This was something inevitable, a turning point she could not escape. She could not continue living in the darkness. She could not remain a shadow in Peter's life. Lucas stood there, saying nothing more. His gaze was gentle, yet unwavering. No more words were needed. Anna understood. Everything she needed to do had never been clearer. The feeling inside Anna at that moment was beyond words. She stood there in the middle of the luxurious party, where lights reflected off shimmering gowns and elegant tuxedos, yet all of it faded in her eyes. She no longer felt like she belonged to that world. Everything around her blurred into the background, giving way to the image of Lucas, the man she had once loved, the man she had lost, and now he stood before her, his gaze filled with understanding, and without a trace of doubt. Every sound, every conversation seemed to fall silent as she looked into his eyes. Memories of the past rushed back as if time itself had turned backward. Anna could not believe that a moment like this could happen after so many years of trying to bury those emotions. The days she spent with Lucas, the quiet afternoons by the lake, the times they sat together talking about dreams they once built together, it was a past she never wanted to forget, yet one she had forced herself to leave behind in order to pursue another life. "Anna," Lucas said softly, his voice warm and unhurried. Just a single word, yet it felt as though he had said everything he had carried for all those years. There was a sense of familiarity in his voice, something she had never felt during her time with Peter. She could see the sincerity in Lucas's eyes, the patience he had for her, something Peter had never shown. The two of them stood facing each other in silence. She did not know what to say. The words she once had for Lucas, the words of love, the words of farewell, all dissolved into quiet. What remained were tangled emotions, unanswered questions she had held on to for so many years. In that stillness, Anna realized that throughout her life with Peter, she had not been living her own life. Every choice, every step had been decided by someone else. She had given up the most important part of herself, her freedom. Peter stood nearby, unaware of what was happening. He continued talking with guests, completely oblivious to the change in Anna. He still believed everything was normal, still unfolding exactly as he had planned. But Anna could not continue living in Peter's shadow. She could not keep playing a role in the life he had scripted for her. Love, marriage, all of it had been a game controlled by Peter, and she was no longer herself in that world. As Lucas stepped closer, Anna felt something shift within her, as if an invisible force was pushing her forward. She could not move, could not speak, yet inside her a powerful determination rose. It was no longer fear, no longer weakness. It was awakening, the realization that she was not an ornament, not a shadow in someone else's life. "You can't go back, can you?" Lucas asked gently, his eyes filled with deep understanding. It was not a question of curiosity, but one from someone who understood her better than she understood herself in that moment. He already knew, no matter what her answer would be. Anna did not reply immediately. She stood there, looking into his eyes, feeling the sincerity and understanding he offered her, something she had never received from Peter, the man she had spent years building a perfect life with, only to forget that she too needed to be loved and understood. "I still love you, Anna," Lucas continued, his voice filled with emotion, yet gentle and without pressure. Those words felt like confirmation that she still mattered, that she was still the person he had searched for all these years. Her heart seemed to stop. She wanted to say something, wanted to tell him she still loved him too, but her throat tightened. She could not return to a past she had buried, even if it was still a part of her soul. Anna turned to look at Peter, the man she had called her husband for so many years. He stood there, unaware of the change within her, unaware that her life had already shifted. He was still talking to his friends, but Anna's gaze no longer held admiration or patience. She only saw a man who had dimmed her identity, who had forced her to live in a world where she did not belong. That realization, that she had lived a life that was not her own, was painful. Yet at the same time, it brought a sense of release. She was no longer the woman Peter wanted her to be. She was no longer someone's shadow. She was Anna, and she had the right to decide her own life. "I can't go back to you, Lucas," Anna whispered, her voice breaking yet firm. "But I need to find myself first." Those words were not a rejection of Lucas's love, but an acknowledgement that she needed to stand on her own, to make her own choices without depending on anyone. Lucas said nothing more. He simply looked at her, his gaze filled with respect and patience. Anna knew that no matter what happened, Lucas would be there, waiting for her to find herself again. When Lucas walked away, Anna remained standing there, feeling as though she had just been carried through a powerful wave. His final glance made her heart sink, as if a part of her had gone with him. Even though he said nothing more, that look had said everything. He would wait, not because he wanted her to return, but because he understood she needed time to find herself again. But Anna no longer had time. She could feel the tension in the air as Peter approached. His silence was different this time, not calm and composed like before, but heavy with something unsettled in every step he took. She did not need to look at his face to know that he had noticed the change in her. Peter had always known when she might become a threat to everything he had built. "I told you not to make a scene," Peter said, his voice low and cold, not caring, but warning. "That man is your past, Anna. Why would you let yourself get tangled up in something that's already over?" His words felt like an invisible blade, cutting into her mind, making her feel small within the world he had created. Anna could not endure it any longer. She looked straight into his eyes, and for the first time, she did not see the love she once believed in, only a man who had once been her husband, now nothing more than a shadow. "Don't try to scare me, Peter," she replied, her voice firmer than ever. "You've made me afraid for years, but not anymore. I'm not afraid of you anymore." Peter's cold gray eyes fixed on her, as if she had said something unimaginable. For a brief moment, silence filled the space between them, broken only by the distant music of the party. He stepped closer, his face twisting with anger, with a hint of contempt. "What do you think you're going to do? Leave me and run back to a man who once left you? You'll regret it, Anna." "I gave you everything you needed." "What did you give me?" Anna asked, her voice cutting through the silence between them. "You gave me a golden cage. You gave me a kind of stability I never wanted. You gave me fear, loneliness, and the feeling of never being seen." She paused, her breath heavy, yet her eyes never left his. "You took my freedom, Peter. That's what you've been hiding all these years." Peter said nothing, but the tension in his body became more obvious. He suddenly turned away, as if there was nothing left to say. But Anna could not let this end so easily. For so long, she had lived in silence, while Peter had quietly controlled everything around her. "Do you think I don't know how you felt?" Peter turned back, his face burning with anger. "I've done everything for you, Anna. I protected you from your past, from Lucas, the man you only see as a wave you can't escape. I didn't want you to regret it again." Anna looked directly into his eyes, the disappointment within her overwhelming everything else. "Lucas is not just the past, Peter. He is the man I loved, the one I lost because I was afraid. He has searched for me all these years, and he never forgot me. But you, Peter, you only wanted me to forget everything so I could serve your ego." She stopped, her voice tight with emotion, but her gaze remained strong. "I can't keep living in your shadow anymore." Her words struck him hard. Peter stood still for a moment, then let out a breath and turned his face away. "You don't understand," he murmured. "I protected us, protected this marriage. Without me, you would have nothing. I did everything for us, not for myself." "Us?" Anna repeated, her voice lowering. "You think we are something real, but there was never an us. There was only you and the world you created. You think I didn't see it, but I did." Peter looked at her with disappointment. No longer the man she once trusted. Everything he said was only to protect the image he had built for himself. None of it was truly for her, only to maintain his control and power. "You don't understand, Anna," Peter said again, his voice cold. "I did everything for you, and you still can't see it. Everything I did was for this marriage, and you will never understand its value." "Its value?" Anna let out a breath, as if the last of her patience had finally been swept away. "You don't understand that this marriage is no longer something I want. I don't need it if it means living without myself." Anna turned away, no longer needing to hear anything else. She was not weak, not someone who would remain standing in the shadows any longer. What she did today was not just leaving Peter, it was choosing herself, accepting that she deserved love and freedom. The door closed behind Anna, as if marking the end of a chapter in her life. Peter remained standing there, his eyes fixed on the place where she had disappeared, his hands clenched so tightly that the muscles in his fingers stood out. She could not believe that she had faced him for 20 years without realizing everything he had done to her life. Every time he touched her, every time he asked her to stay silent, to yield, it had all been part of his plan. And she, his wife, had been blind, believing everything was for the family, for stability. But today, everything was different. Silence was no longer a shield for the wounds she had endured for so many years. She was no longer afraid, no longer bowing her head before his words. Anna stood facing Peter in the dim living room, lit only by the faint glow of the chandelier, casting long shadows across the floor. Peter was no longer the man she once loved, but a fading figure, stripped of his power. "You really don't understand, do you?" Peter said, his voice soft but filled with disappointment. "You think I did all this to control you, to make you feel like you had no rights?" He stepped closer, his voice lowering, as if he would not allow her to escape. "Anna, I did everything for us, for your happiness. You can't imagine what I sacrificed to keep everything stable. And now you want to destroy it all because of a man who left you." His words struck her like a blow to the heart. She could not comprehend how he still believed she had not seen through everything. Every decision, every action of his had been about maintaining power, about controlling her. Every time he asked her to yield, every time he made her feel small, unworthy of herself, it had been his way of strengthening that control. "That's not true, Peter," Anna replied, her voice more resolute than ever. She could feel the tension in her body, but she knew there was no turning back. "Do you think I didn't see it? You don't love me, Peter. You love your control over me. You love turning me into a shadow in your life." Peter turned away, saying nothing, the disappointment on his face clear. She could see him struggling within himself, torn between protecting his ego and facing the truth. He did not want to lose control, did not want to admit that everything he had done was to preserve his own stability, not for her, not for the love he once promised. "I did everything for you, for this family," Peter said, but this time, his voice no longer carried confidence. "Do you understand? We had everything, Anna. A beautiful house, a comfortable life. Not everyone has that. Do you really want to destroy it all for a moment of emotion?" Anna shook her head, tears beginning to fall down her cheeks, not from weakness, but from the realization that she had been living in a cage built by Peter. She had lived for years without knowing she had lost her freedom. She had abandoned her dreams, her desires, just to please this man, the one she believed was her husband, her partner, but who had only ever been a possessor. "You don't understand, Peter," Anna said, her voice soft yet sharp. "You don't understand that what you call a family, what you call happiness, is nothing but an illusion. It's a world you built for yourself, a world where I was never allowed to truly be myself." Peter looked at her, his eyes red with anger and frustration. He stepped closer again, as if to reclaim her, to pull her back, as though he still held control. But this time Anna did not step back. She stood firm, her hands clenched, refusing to be overpowered again. "You can't leave me, Anna," Peter whispered, his voice filled with challenge. "I protected us from everything. Do you think you can walk away without consequences? You'll regret it." "No, Peter, I won't regret it," Anna replied, each word carrying defiance. "I will not regret this decision. You cannot control my life anymore. I have the right to choose for myself. I will live my life for real, not in your shadow." Peter stood still as if there was nothing left to say. He knew he had lost, not because Anna had left him, but because he could no longer hold on to what he had tried to build. In the end, Anna understood that Peter's control was not love, it was possession, and she was finally strong enough to let go, to take back control of her own life. The feeling after the confrontation with Peter made Anna feel like someone who had just awakened from a long sleep. Everything inside her suddenly became clear. For so many years, she had lived in the shadow of a man she believed was her husband, living a life that was never truly hers, only to maintain the stability and perfect image he had created. But today, everything had changed. Anna was no longer the timid girl, no longer the silent woman standing behind a perfect husband. She had seen the truth and understood what she needed to do next. As she walked out of the room, her steps felt steadier than ever. The tangled emotions within her seemed to have been released, as if the burdens she had carried for so long had suddenly lifted. She no longer had to hide, no longer had to live in fear. Anna had decided she would not continue living in a marriage that she had never truly belonged to. But that decision was not easy. Over the years, everything she had was built on the stability Peter provided, from the beautiful house to the luxurious parties to the sense of protection from risk. Yet that same stability had turned her into a shadow in her own life. Day after day, she had only tried to please Peter, to keep everything aligned with his expectations. Her dreams, her desires had slowly faded into forgotten things. But now, standing at this turning point, she knew she could not continue living within that shell. She needed freedom, not only material freedom, but emotional and spiritual freedom. Anna stepped into her bedroom, the place where she had spent years living like an invisible woman. She looked into the mirror and saw her reflection, but not the emptiness or pain she once thought defined her life. Instead, she saw a strong woman, determined, capable of deciding her own future. She no longer had to live according to Peter's expectations, no longer had to maintain a life she had never chosen. But like a powerful shock, Anna also realized that leaving Peter would not be easy. The years with him, despite the pain, were still a significant part of her life. Everything she had built, her relationships, her connections, all would change. Leaving Peter was not just leaving a man, it was leaving an entire world she had grown used to. A world full of illusion, yet also of safety and stability. Anna let out a slow breath, feeling as though she was standing at the edge of a cliff. She knew she had to overcome that fear, but how could she let go of everything she had built? Her eyes moved to the phone on the table, and the image of Lucas appeared in her mind. He was the only person who could help her break free from the constraints Peter had created. But should she rely on him? Would it be a mistake to seek escape through a past relationship? She had loved Lucas once, but had left him out of fear. Now that he had returned to her life, was she simply trying to escape reality? Anna was no longer sure. She needed to face her own situation independently, without letting Lucas's presence distract her. The sense of freedom made her feel both exhilarated and afraid. She did not know if she had the strength to begin again, but one thing she knew for certain, she could not continue living like this. She had to stand up and take control of her life. "I will do this," she whispered to herself, as if reminding herself of the decision she was about to face. Yet inside her, uncertainty still lingered. Could she truly step away from this life without losing herself? Could she rediscover who she was in a world she had ignored for so many years? Anna knew there were no easy answers. Every decision came with a cost, and she would have to face loss, whether material or emotional. That night, as she sat alone in the quiet room, she felt as though she stood at a critical crossroads. It was the moment of decision, when everything she had known would have to change. She had lived for others for far too long. It was time to live for herself. But did she have the courage to move past fear and begin again? The feeling of freedom within her grew stronger. Yet the worry and uncertainty had not disappeared. She wondered if she would regret it, but immediately she knew the answer. No matter what happened, she could not go back. She had finally claimed herself in this life, and she knew that no matter how difficult the road ahead might be, she would overcome it. She would live a life she chose, not one designed by someone else. She would take control of her own life, even if it meant starting again from nothing. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight streamed through the bedroom window, Anna woke with a strange feeling. She no longer felt the heaviness in her body, no longer felt like a shadow of herself inside the vast room Peter had built for her. This sense of peace, though only the beginning, was deep and powerful. She no longer needed to search for reasons to remain silent. Freedom was no longer a distant concept. It was her determination to live a life no longer bound by external pressures. Anna rose and looked out the window, where the early morning light painted a calm and gentle scene, as if the world itself was welcoming her, ready for her to begin again. She let out a breath, not from fear or anxiety, but from the realization that she had stepped onto a new path, one with no turning back. She woke early that day, deciding to clean her room, not because she needed to do something for Peter, but because she wanted to make this space her own, a space free of control, free of direction from anyone but herself. As she cleared away items she no longer needed, a quiet sense of peace settled over her. Each time she discarded something without value, she felt lighter, as if the burdens within her were slowly being released. When Anna stepped outside and felt the fresh air, she realized she had never truly lived fully in this world. She had spent too long depending on others, losing her independence and her right to choose her own life. But today, as she walked away from that house, she felt freedom in every step. There were no more watchful eyes from Peter, no more controlling words. Everything now belonged to her, and she had the right to choose. Anna began to rediscover what she had lost over the years. She wanted to return to the things she once loved. She no longer had to carry the weight of a life she had no part in deciding. She started exploring the paths she had once abandoned, thinking about the directions she could take. It was unfamiliar, but filled with a quiet joy. She went to a small cafe she used to visit when she was younger, before everything changed. Sitting there, sipping her coffee, felt like stepping back in time. She no longer had to remain in a confined space to maintain a perfect image. She was no longer a woman standing on the sidelines of her own life. She was free. able to decide everything for herself. Anna called a few old friends she had lost touch with, conversations she had once avoided so as not to disturb Peter, connections she had let fade away. But now, everything was different. She wanted to reconnect with the world, not to seek rescue, but to rediscover herself. She wanted to begin again from nothing, to find the joy she had once forgotten. What brought her happiness was not attention from others, but the feeling of independence, the ability to take control of her own life. She no longer lived by the expectations of others. With each passing day, she felt stronger, more confident. She no longer felt hidden behind someone else's decisions. Nothing happened instantly. Anna still had to face challenges, still carried worries about the future. But this time, she was not afraid. She knew she could overcome everything as long as she remained determined. During the years she lived under Peter's shadow, she had lost many important things, but now she would not allow herself to live in that emptiness any longer. One late afternoon, when Anna returned home, she realized something important. She no longer felt fear when stepping inside. That house was no longer a place that confined her, but a space she could now claim as her own. She no longer needed to hide, no longer needed to stay silent out of fear of hurting someone. Everything belonged to her, and she would not allow anyone or anything to take away her freedom. She sat down on the chair in the living room and looked around. Everything seemed different, not because of the objects in the house, but because of her. She had changed. She had found herself again, and for the first time in many years, she felt free. She could breathe fully. She could smile without worrying that she might do something wrong. Anna was no longer a woman trapped in a life that was not hers. She had stepped out of the past and into a future filled with hope and freedom. She did not know what lay ahead, but at least she knew she would not walk alone. She would walk with herself, and that was what mattered most. Since deciding to leave Peter, Anna had been forced to face countless challenges. Although she was no longer living under his control, every step in her new life was filled with anxiety and uncertainty. In those early days, she felt like a stranger to herself, as if she had just stepped out of a world she no longer understood or belonged to. Every decision, every action became an experiment, a search for the truth about who she was and the life she was beginning to rebuild from nothing. And to feel the difference between what was called freedom and the sense of being lost. Without someone arranging her life for her, she suddenly did not know what to do. Simple conversations, small daily choices, all turned into significant decisions. It was not a feeling of pure liberation, but a kind of freedom mixed with unease, because she now had to take responsibility for everything she did, for everything that would come in the future. She slowly adjusted ere she no longer depended on Peter or anyone else. Each morning, she reminded herself to find joy in the smallest things. She learned to take care of herself, from preparing her own breakfast to planning her day. There were no more exhausting conversations with Peter about things she never had the right to decide, no more feeling overshadowed in every discussion. Now, when she stood in front of the mirror, she felt she could finally speak her thoughts without fear of being hurt. Yet this transformation was not easy. Of Peter, the past still lingered. She could not escape the sense of guilt when she thought about family, about the relationships she had left behind. She felt as if she had abandoned everything that once represented stability and safety. Had she been right to leave it all behind in search of a new life, or was she simply running away from responsibility, trying to find herself? One afternoon, while sitting in a cafe, her phone suddenly raw screened and saw a familiar name, Peter. A strange feeling filled her chest. Every call from him carried an invisible pressure, a quiet threat she had endured for years. She paused for a moment before deciding to answer. "You can't just leave like that, Anna. I won't allow it. What do you think you'll chaos?" Peter's voice was low and cold, unchanged after all this time. His words stirred a surge of anger inside her. "Do you really think you have the right to say anything to me?" Anna replied, her voice strong and unwa done for me all these years. "What did you protect? A false life? A cage you built to keep me inside? Do you really think I would come back to you after everything you've done?" Peter fell silent for a moment. Anna knew he was trying to defend himself, but his words no longer held any power over her. The times she had bowed her head to please him were over. She was no longer afraid to face him, no longer the weak one in that relationship. "You can't just walk away like this, Anna. You know that," Peter continued, his voice slightly unsteady, as if for the first time in years, he might regret leaving everything behind. "I won't regret it," Anna said without hesitation. "I've lived in your shadow for far too long. It's time I lived for myself." After ending the call, Anna felt as Ayin lifted from her. She no longer had to listen to Peter's threats. She knew she had made the right decision to leave, even if Ulti's ahead. It was a hard choice, but it was her choice, the life she would now build for herself. Still, she could not deny the lingering worry within her. Would she be strong enough to rebuild her life, to stand on her own without Peter's protection? These questions continued to circle in her mind, but I began to face them. One day, she met an old friend she had not seen in years, someone she had lost contact with during her time with Peter. Their conversation was not just casual talk, it was a reconnection with her past, with herself. Anna realized had lived a restricted life. There were still relationships, still opportunities waiting for her to rebuild from. With every conversation, with every step forward, Anna felt herself slowly returning. Life was no longer a struggle just to survive. It had become a journey to rediscover true values. She knew there would still be many challenges ahead, but she also was now strong enough to face them. Anna stood in front of the mirror, looking at her own reflection. Her face no longer reflected a defeated woman, no longer the faint shadow Peter had built her into. Her hair flowed freely, her features calm yet determined. She was no longer afraid, no longer someone who lived according to the expectations of others. She was Anna, a strong woman, someone who had fought to find herself again, and today she would not turn back. Every step Anna had taken since leaving Peter carried a heavy weight. She had left behind everything, not only a life of material comfort, but also relationships, the things society called stability. But looking back, she realized that very stability had suffocated her, had kept her from living as her true self. She could not continue living as a shadow, could not keep seeking safety in paths created by others. The change within her did not come only from leaving Peter, but from facing herself, from confronting the questions she had avoided for so many years. Who am I? That question was not easy to answer, but Anna knew that with each passing day, she was getting closer. She no longer needed to rely on anyone, no longer needed validation from those who did not understand her. She had learned to love herself, and that was the first step to starting again. Today, Anna had not only found herself, but also discovered an inner strength she never knew she had. She was no longer weak or afraid, but a woman who knew what she wanted and was willing to go all the way to achieve it. Her steps no longer trembled. Every decision, every choice came from within her, not from pressure or control. When she thought of Lucas, a gentle yet emotional feeling rose within her. He was the only one who had seen her not as a decoration, but as a real person with dreams and emotions. He had never imposed anything on her, never asked her to change to fit his expectations. Lucas had been there, but this time, if anything were to happen between them, it would be a choice made freely, not an escape, not dependent. She did not need salvation from any man, not from Lucas or anyone else. She had saved herself, and that was what mattered most. The freedom Anna was discovering was not something given to her from the outside, it was something she created within herself. It was the determination not to let anyone or anything stand in the way of the path she had chosen. In the end, Anna decided she would not return to Lucas, not because her feelings for him had faded, but because she understood that her life had to be guided by her own hands. Not because she did not love him, but because she needed to stand on her own in the face of every challenge. These decisions were not easy, but she knew this was the moment to truly live for herself. She could not continue allowing others to define her life, whether it was Peter or Lucas. She looked back on everything, from the moment she walked out of Peter's house until now. Those years had been lived inside a golden cage, where everything appeared perfect, yet nothing truly belonged to her. Now, every step, every conversation was something she fully controlled. She no longer needed to be afraid, no longer needed to believe that her life belonged to someone else. Everything belonged to her, and she had the right to rebuild it from the beginning. Anna stepped outside and took a deep breath. Sunlight touched her face, illuminating the space around her. Her steps no longer felt heavy. Each step was a confirmation that she had chosen the right path. She was not searching for salvation outside herself, but within her own awakening and courage to face life's challenges. Freedom was not something distant. It was a right anyone could claim if they were brave enough to move beyond their fears. With every step, Anna felt herself growing stronger. She was no longer a woman trapped in a life she did not create. She had found herself and stepped into a new chapter of her life, one where she no longer lived in darkness, no longer endured pressure from the outside. This life was hers, and she would live it her way. "It's never too late to start again," Anna whispered to herself, a quiet but powerful affirmation, and with that confidence, she kept walking forward, ready to face whatever lay ahead. Anna's story is not only the journey of a woman finding herself again, but also a reminder to all of us that it is never too late to change, to live for ourselves. Sometimes, we must step through fear, let go of what no longer belongs to us, in order to open a new chapter filled with hope and freedom. If this story has touched your heart, do not hesitate to share it with those around you. Remember that each of us has the right to choose the life we truly deserve. Do not let anyone or anything hold you back within the limits of fear. Please like, comment, and share this story to spread the message of freedom and inner strength. And if you believe there are people around you who need to hear this, let them know that they too can begin again today, because we all deserve to live a life full of meaning and freedom.